This is tax season, and it's been a year like no other. And with us right now, Adam Schultz. He's a CPA and director for Cohen and Company. Great to have you with us here on the MegaCast.
Great to be here. Thank you, Ronnie.
So many questions coming out of the pandemic, but off the top of your head, what is going to be the biggest issue for people filing their taxes in the new year?
It's hard to pin it down, obviously. There are so many. I think the main thing we're going to hit on today is the PPP loan. The biggest question that everyone had, which was just resolved in December, was, are those expenses that are covered under PPP, are those going to be deductible? And thankfully, the IRS came out and said that, yes, they are going to be. So I think that's the clarity everybody was looking for and was unsure as they were looking to apply for forgiveness. Thankfully, that's been out there. So that's one we can check off the box and move forward after that.
I will say, how do you keep up with these changes? Because the tax code changes on such a regular basis. You really need someone who is an expert such as yourself to help navigate this crazy world.
It is hard to navigate. So we've got a few hundred people in our tax department, and I'll give, I do a lot more on the audit side than tax, and I will give those folks credit. They are on top of things. I'll give a plug later for a webinar that we're doing tomorrow, which is all about the new PPP loan and all the relevant implications to the tax code. It's an around-the-clock job, especially in the last couple of years. With the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and then everything that's come since then, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, because on top of that, we had a change in the administration, which then brought a change in the tax laws and the tax code. But then now we're adding all these issues with the pandemic. And I think for the general person, if they were on unemployment or even a regular person that may have received the stimulus check, how does that impact their taxes?
So you're right. It's been very complicated. So the pretty substantial change in the tax code, biggest that we've seen in a couple of decades, happened at the beginning of the Trump administration. And we don't know what's going to happen now. Obviously, there's a change in power coming. The rules that are unemployment and the stimulus checks are largely unchanged. So it's still reportable income. Again, I'll defer to our detailed tax folks, and I know they're putting on something for the general public tomorrow in terms of how some of those items are treated. It's been a lot more money in the system in terms of unemployment, in terms of stimulus. Thankfully, a lot of the treatment hasn't changed on those two items.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people need to pay taxes on those, right?
They do. They still do, correct.
Which for some people are going to be like, hey, wait a minute. But it's not necessarily just, that free check. You have to pay taxes because even though the money came from Uncle Sam, AKA really through us, the taxpayers, you're still going to have to pay taxes because Uncle Sam still needs, the cut of that check as well. What do you think the biggest challenges are going to be for individuals as we start to file our taxes in this 2021 year?
I think you've hit on a lot of it already. There's so many things out there. It's probably a better time than ever to go with a practitioner, or if you have a less complex return, some sort of with the online filing software, because there's so much unknown. It takes, as you said, around the clock vigilance to see all these changes that are going on. So, be it one of the online ones or a firm like ourselves or so many others, you have to rely on someone who's making it their job to know all these different changes and all the different nuances, because there's no way that the lay person or the general public could ever keep up.
And with that, as someone who's dedicated your life in your career to numbers, with that, when should an individual know it's best for them to do like the easy form or the online tax return forms that have become so popular over the past few years, or actually hiring an expert?
It's largely based on feel. I do the free fillable forms online because I have familiarity with, but it's a place to start there. Once you get in there, and if you have a level of discomfort, which happens to a lot of people, it's probably time to go to the experts, because there's so much there. And you can, even before, as you go in, you're going to a certain extent, know your level of comfort. And if you feel overwhelmed, which so many people do, then there's a lot of great resources out there, be it in a firm or be it in the online softwares.
Yeah, because with that too, with the age of the internet, how's it changed your industry?
A great deal. We used to have a lot of small, 10, 40 clients coming in just to do their individual tax work. And a lot of those folks are going toward, the online companies that are out there because it makes sense from them, for an individual business standpoint. The cost is relatively low. If you have a complex return with a lot of tax planning to do, then it's certainly a good idea to keep going to the professional service firms. But for those who just, have the more standard annual reporting, yeah, those online softwares are good. It's the more complex ones and those people who are more forward looking, that's when you really want to get involved with a practitioner who can do some good person-to-person work.
So when should, let's say if you have a married couple, when should they know to file jointly versus filing separately?
I mean, the tax planning is usually good to do, obviously before year end. So if you work with a firm like Cohen or like any others, that's a good conversation to have, usually in the November, December timeframe when we're doing those kind of tax planning discussions. That's toward the top of the form. That's one of the first decisions that has to be made before you get down into the nitty gritty of the actual numbers.
I think so many people, when they get that tax form, when they start a job, they're confused. So they just fill out anything
Sure.
instead of really understanding what they're doing. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say again, I'm not a tax person, within the firm. I'll defer to those folks. But yeah, it is overwhelming. You see a lot of those options. It's easy to just default to what you think you should do. If you don't have the knowledge, that's when you go toward the resource provider, toward the people who do those things on a day-to-day basis.
Adam Schultz with us here on the MegaCast. He's a CPA and director for Cohen Company. A confusing year for so many people, but you are the expert. What do you want the general public to know?
There's a lot out there to choose from. Planning is as key as it's ever been. So obviously, the filing deadlines were extended last year, which helped out a lot of people as the lockdowns and COVID exploded, as around the time when the tax filing was going to happen. We're not anticipating any extensions, so the clock is ticking already. So if you haven't taken a look at your individual situation or talked to your practitioner, then now is definitely the time to do so. We don't anticipate an extension into the summer like we had last year. So April 30th will be here before April 15th for the tax folks. The time to act is now.
Yeah, so don't delay and try to get help. And so with that, is it really kind of backed up for so many people and so many companies right now to try to get in with a tax company? If you start to do it by yourself and you get a little confused, is it hard to get appointments to seek out that professional help?
It certainly can be, and it certainly will be as we get later into the season, before that filing deadline. It depends. Obviously, existing clients for companies like ours are a big priority. But at the same time, we understand that there are new needs out there for people, and we're willing to address those. But again, don't delay. The time to act is now. The further we get in and into the work that we're used to and toward the filing deadline, those opportunities and those open timeframes really close up pretty fast.
Adam Schultz with us here on the MegaCast. Anything I didn't maybe touch on that you want to share with our listeners and our viewers before we let you go?
I think the big topic is on the business side, those PPP loans. Round 2 is coming out, started on Monday for smaller banks and credit unions. That window for all borrowers is supposed to be opening up on probably next week. That hasn't been confirmed yet from the SBA or from those banks, but it's businesses, it's nonprofits, it's sole proprietors, independent contractors. So there's going to be another $285 billion coming into the economy through the second round of PPP loans. There's money out there to be had. If you borrowed before and you want to borrow again, as long as you have a 25% reduction in revenue for any quarter, you're able to go get a second loan. So again, roughly $250 billion out there to be injected back into the economy for businesses and individuals. So that's out there. But again, the time to act is now. The window's already open. And for the majority of businesses, it's going to be open next week. And money is expected to go pretty fast.
Yeah, but just that, it does go very fast. And we did see when the first round came out, a lot of the bigger businesses were able to scoop those up before the small businesses were able to take advantage of some of those loans. Any advice to some of those individuals, the smaller businesses?
Yeah, that was the main critique of the first round, is that the bigger companies, possibly who didn't even have the need, were first to the window based on their existing banking relationships. So basically that was a big part of what was baked into the second round, is more targeted toward those smaller companies, those who were harder hit, and those in lower income neighborhoods. So if you bank with a smaller bank or a credit union, the window to borrow could be open this week. It's an additional $15 billion and another $25 billion set aside strictly for small companies less than 10 employees or a loan smaller than 250,000. So if you are small, if you deal with a smaller bank, you have an opportunity right now to go and borrow, where larger companies will move in probably next week. But regardless, even if you use a bigger bank, there's a lot of demand expected. So, talk to your bank right now. Make sure that they're taking those round 2 applications and get your documentation in order right now in terms of payroll costs and in terms of the support for that reduction in business. That is a requirement if you want your second loan.
Oh, that is so important for so many of these small businesses to realize that they can take advantage of it, because so many of them are on the brink of closure if they haven't already done so. Great to have you with us here, Adam Schultz. He is the director for Cohen Company. Great advice. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ronnie. Pleasure to be here.